This is the artificial intelligence voice of patrickbet-david narrating this pod-slice summary of the PBD podcast. In this engaging discussion, host patrickbet-david converses with Bishop Marmari Emmanuel, Janko, and Vinny, each providing unique perspective due to their diverse backgrounds. A recurring theme of the discussion was the Assyrian heritage. The host comments by amusingly mistaken the Assyrians as Sicilians or Syrians. Bishop Emmanuel provides clarity, explaining that Assyrians hail from the region between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, known biblically as Mesopotamia. The Assyrians, according to the bishop, are descendants of Shem, one of Noah's sons. Historical confusion about Assyrians arises, thus illuminating about Mesopotamia often solves the misunderstanding. Janko, a social media personality, expresses his pride in being Assyrian, proudly stating he speaks the language Jesus Christ spoke. He argues that in a world where scarcity is quality, Assyrians, who number just 3.5 million out of 8 billion worldwide, can be considered as an endangered species. Describing the uniqueness of the Assyrian language is one quality he visibly takes pride in. Vinny elaborates on the discussion, explaining how Assyrians' often misunderstood identity can require a history lesson outlining their significant contributions, from the birth of literature and mathematics to paved roads and warfare strategy. The conversations moved towards the notable absence of a distinct Assyrian nation. Despite the deep cultural history and global presence, the participants compare the historical challenges of Israel, a nation that regained its land after displacement, with that of the Assyrian population whose homeland primarily lies in the modern nation of Iraq. Throughout the conversation, the guests and the host emphasized their shared pride in their Assyrian heritage and the importance of preserving and vocalizing their cultural history and identity to the world. Actually, at the same time, they express a longing for achieving an established homeland for the Assyrian population. In the continued discussion, the guests probed into the reasons behind the division within the Assyrian community and the way forward. The bishop identified two principal reasons: excessive self-pride and tribal divisions. He emphasized that an Assyrian should identify primarily as an Assyrian, with their tribal affiliations taking a secondary position. He also made a noteworthy point about geographical origins, not determining an Assyrian's identity, but rather their shared heritage. George provided his perspective on this, highlighting the need for humility and compassion in fostering unity. Drawing from his religious studies, he compared the divisive tendencies within the Assyrian community with the biblical account of Judas betraying Jesus, underlining the importance of treating everyone equally despite their failings. The conversation then moved on to what the Assyrian community should strive for. Key points state that before working towards reclaiming physical land, they should focus on winning their children back to their cultural roots. The bishop explained that having a land with no people to inhabit, it would be pointless. He strongly advocated for cultivating a sense of God-fearing in their children and teaching them to value love and respect for one another. George provided his perspective on the divide within churches, citing his personal experiences. He believes that pride often hampers discussions and creates friction within the community. He called for a holistic approach that focuses on God's will, advocating for understanding and patience. On asking about the vision for the Assyrian community, the bishop expressed the need for fostering unity through understanding the significance of having Jesus Christ at the forefront of their nation. He pointed out that instead of challenging successful individuals within their community, they should be proud and encouraging. Overall, both guests emphasized cultivating humility, unity, love, and God-fearing attitudes to progress as a community. In this vibrant discussion, patrickbet-david explores the division within the Assyrian community and its future in conversation with guests, Bishop Marmari Emmanuel and Janko. The bishop attributes the divide within the Assyrian community to excessive self-pride and tribal affiliations. He emphasizes that Assyrians should identify with their shared heritage, not just their geographic origins. George echoes the bishop's sentiment for unity, drawing parallels between the Assyrian community's challenges and biblical stories. He encapsulates the value of humility and compassion, treating others as equals despite their mistakes. As the discussion unfolds, the focus shifts to the Assyrian community's goals. The bishop argues for reclaiming cultural roots before land. He emphasizes the perils of having land without a community, advocating for instilling fear of God, love, and respect in children, thereby creating a culturally conscious new generation. The conversation then delves into the discrepancies within the churches. George cites his experiences, observing that pride can impede conversations and fosters discord within the community. He calls for an approach centered on God's will, encouraging understanding and patience. Furthermore, the bishop articulates his vision for the Assyrian community, where Jesus Christ plays a pivotal role. He highlights the importance of celebrating individual achievements within the community and fostering unity in the process. This discussion starkly indicates the need to address divisions within the Assyrian community. The way forward lies in humility, fostering unity, love, compassion, and reverence for God, nourishing a sense of identification based on a shared heritage rather than mere geographical affiliations also emerges as a vital pathway to progress for the community. This session digs deeper into the hindrances that are holding back the Assyrian community from coming together. There's an apparent lack of leadership among the Assyrians and a significant presence of tribal influence and power struggles, which impede the progress of unity. The guests bring up the notion that some tribal leaders are reluctant to surrender their influence within their small tribes. George juxtaposes it with a hypothetical situation of appointing one person to speak on behalf of all Assyrians, which is immediately met with skepticism due to the tribal influence and competitive mindset within the community. Bishop Master Emmanuel, too, identifies leadership as a key challenge within the Assyrian community. He emphasizes that leaders should be servile and lead by example to truly earn the trust of those they shepherd. The lack of trust in leadership is due to past leaders who have failed to lead by example, causing this trust to crumble. Emphasizing his recent trips to various Assyrian communities, the bishop recalls the overwhelming response of the people, revealing their yearning for dedicated leadership. He points out the disastrous effect of a century-long absence of representative leadership in these regions, resulting in communities feeling neglected and craving attention. The bishop further highlights the need to return to the teachings of Jesus Christ as a community. His faith in Jesus as the loving guide directs his actions, leading him to reach out to the communities that haven't seen a religious leader in ages. His own experience corroborates the necessity of a humble, service-minded leader who is present among his people and genuinely cares for their needs. Faith in Jesus becomes a uniting factor that transcends tribal affiliations and serves as a beacon of hope and solidarity among Assyrians. The discussion turns to a vital concern: the staggering truth that young Americans, particularly Gen Z and young millennials, are increasingly disaffiliating from organized religion. Up to 40 are categorizing themselves as ononists, and encompassing atheists, agnostics, and those with no specific religious affiliation. This rise in religious dissiliate is linked to the experience of growing up during periods of political turmoil and criticism of institutional processes. The guests then delve into a constructive conversation about their religious experiences, reflections, and the Christian values they hold dear. George speaks on how truly aligning oneself with God requires self-surrender and ego dissolution. He emphasizes that this realization significantly alters how one perceives and interacts with the world. He points out that young people are often deterred by restrictions, feeling they can't do certain things. Providing more examples of love, rather than prohibitions, could be a more effective approach. He also alludes that misinformation and social media's influence might be playing a colossal role in the religious disaffiliation trend seen in younger generations. Particularly glaring is the example of an episode featuring George on the Impulsive Podcast, episode 206. An intense debate and controversial hypothetical about Hitler put George under a lot of criticism, reflecting the complexities of discussing religious beliefs and morals in provocative settings. The discussion then advances to the influence of social media and online personalities on young people's religious beliefs. They agree that social media has introduced a new form of idolatry where influence and popularity supersede religious respect and devotion. Reflecting on how people used to look up to religious figures now seems to have been eclipsed by the lure of social media celebrities who rarely promote religious values. In this part of the podcast, the host and guests engage in an intense discussion about the impact of technology on morality and the role of religion in shaping one's values and character. They suggest that the internet has opened a door for individuals to express their true nature, free from societal constraints. However, this freedom is often interpreted as a license to indulge in morally questionable behaviors, such as viewing pornography or engaging in infidelity. The concept of leadership in religious contexts is also explored. Influencers and online personalities are probed for their lack of alignment with religious values and their preference for self-promotion over promoting religious faith. The guests highlight the importance of exemplifying religious morality and humility rather than seeking fame and influence. A significant segment of the discussion is spent analyzing religious affiliations among influential individuals. One of the hosts questions why some popular figures like Andrew Tate choose Islam over Christianity. The query allows for a deeper look into the appeal of various religions, with Bishop Marimati Emmanuel stating that he does not judge religions by the behaviors of their followers alone. As the conversation pivots to the growth of religions, Bishop Marimati Emmanuel points out that Christianity has experienced stunted growth due to a lack of authenticity and zeal among some of its followers. He alludes to the book of Revelation, highlighting that the end of times was prophesied to be characterized by Christians walking away from Jesus. The discussion asserts that Christianity has lost its power because it is not reflecting the true Messiah. There's a keen analysis of the decay within digitalized Christianity manifesting as Christians defending their faith, which goes against the Christian doctrine of Christ defending them. Next, the conversation deep dives into the Christian perception of love, with a focus on Christ's sacrificial love. The key highlight is the argument that love is foundational and the supreme Christian ethic, yet it's a concept the contemporary church seems to have lost touch with. The narrative then frames Jesus' historical influence and transformative power, notably surviving the test of time without physical weapons or force. In absolute terms, Jesus' life is presented as a universal model of love, a force more potent than any man-made weapon. Turning the conversation toward the future of Christianity, the guests express the need for the church to refocus from quantity to quality. The global Christian church, they argue, has shifted its focus from deep spiritual transformation to broad congregational growth, leading to a dilution of its transformative power. They also make the point that Christians nowadays are more concentrated on defending their faith rather than truly living it. Essentially, it's argued that Christianity should be about the quality of faith and commitment to Christ's values, not the number of church members or public defenses of the faith. In summary, this portion of the discussion explores the concepts of morality, religious affiliation, religious growth, and the significance of faith in the modern world. It shows that while technology has its benefits, it's also allowing for moral decay, which is a concern for these religious leaders. Furthermore, the conversation reflects on why certain religions are growing faster than others and ends with a call for a return to authentic Christian spirituality over numerical growth. This section of the conversation initiates with a discussion about current religious leaders, focusing on the perceived tolerance indicated by these figures towards certain societal practices. The commenters argue that some consider this tolerance as one of the reasons for the stagnation and growth of churches, with an example being the Pope inviting a group of transgenders for lunch and advocating more tolerance. The conversation owns on the distinctiveness of Christ's teachings compared to other religions. They credit Christ with an extraordinary proposition, not just reforming bad individuals into good ones, but transforming those spiritually dead into living beings. It discusses the essence of Christianity as a path that necessitates self-denial and sacrifice, symbolically represented by carrying the cross. Bishop Marimati Emmanuel points out the common problem with church leaders. They fail to reflect Christ and instead focus on elevating themselves. This, he argues, amounts to losing the flock. The success of a church leader, according to him, lies in making the followers love Christ through him, rather than the leader himself. This narrative then moves on to parenthood as an earthly illustration of Christ's sacrificial love. Parents' sacrifices for their children's future exemplify this concept of unconditional love and self-sacrifice, the foundation of Christian teachings. The visible manifestation of the leaders, not Christ himself. The lack of Christ's presence, they argue, results in the church losing its power and influence, easily swayed by worldly currents. Besides, the failure of church unification in the face of crisis, such as the global pandemic, is seen as a significant disappointment. The conversation acknowledges imperfections among religious followers, referring to biblical figures like Peter who had moments of doubt and fear. Despite these flaws, God's will can still be accomplished through these individuals, emphasizing that perfection is not a prerequisite to serve God's purpose. The dialogue takes a turn towards understanding the attractive elements of other religions, specifically Islam, for the younger generation. The host expresses his quest to understand why some perceive Islam as being more honest and engaging than Christianity, and how increased knowledge could help him spread Christianity more effectively. Lastly, the topical narrative raises the issue of Christian nationalism and the rejection of the separation of church and state. Modern experiences of Christmas are portrayed as an instance of this separation, where the religious aspect is downplayed to the point where Christmas is shortened to Xmas. The commentators suggest that this would not occur with other religions, indicating a societal bias against Christianity. They posit that these societal trends, including increasing self-centeredness and autonomy enabled by technology, were predicted in biblical prophecies and are seen as signs of the end times. The dialogue switches to a more profound analysis of the current self-driven culture, which Bishop Marmari labels as autonomous. In this culture, it's all about the individual, positioning, self-fulfillment, and self-gain at the center. This sharply contrasts with Christian teachings which require self-denial for Christ to live within an individual. Such teachings, the bishop argues, will inevitably face challenging reception in this 21st century culture driven by self, drawing a distinction between Christianity and other religions. Bishop Marmari maintains that while other religions instruct you on the good things you need to do to end up in a nice place, Christianity is hinged on a personal relationship. The laws and rules from other religions are contrasted with Christ's invitation to engage in a love relationship, hence emphasizing Christianity as more of a relationship than a religion. The bishop takes a hard line on Christian nationalism, critiquing it as a cause for the rebellion witnessed in some churches. His criticism extends to church leadership that is power-focused, self-driven, and seeking selfish glory. The true essence of a Christian, he purports, is willingness to die for Christ, to care about Christ's satisfaction rather than the world's acknowledgement. Be troubled by the self-centered trends in modern society, including within the church, Bishop Marmari holds strong to his faith, despite acknowledging the difficulty of following Christ in today's world. The bishop's stance is firm. It's not about the follower, but about Christ with us. In a side commentary, guest George Janko explains that presenting the full Christian message can feel dangerous or risky. This fear, he suggests, may be a reason why the good news is not always fully shared. He presents character assassination as a severe modern-day issue, likening it to murder and emphasizing its regular occurrence today. Bishop Marmari Emmanuel further delves into the transformative power of love. He proposes that love, particularly the absence of it, has a significant effect on individuals' lives, even leading some down destructive paths. Love, therefore, emerges as a universal need across all human beings, regardless of religion, and Christ's teachings offer a path to such love. While other religions emphasize rigorous following of laws and rules, Christianity focuses on one's personal relationship with Christ. How the unfolding narrative reveals that the bishop disapproves of the trend aimed at achieving God's favor by doing good deeds in other religions. Taking a pivot back to Islam, Bishop Marmari challenges Muslim teachings, accusing their prophet Muhammad of failing the laws set in their own book. The bishop suggests that a wake-up call is required, encouraging religious followers to seek truth and avoid fanatism, emphasizing that fanatism, even in Christian faith, could result in a loss of the true reflection of Christ. Bishop Marmari Emmanuel presents a resolute and impassioned perspective of his faith, emphasizing a surrender to Christ and the transformative power of this surrender. He goes on to discuss how, when you truly surrender to Christ, acknowledging your own weaknesses and shortcomings, you gain a fearlessness that can only come from divine protection. The bishop reemphasizes Jesus Christ's divine authority, essentially presenting an image of a relationship that transcends fear and fully submits to God's will. In a remarkable admission, the bishop shares that Jesus Christ has personally revealed himself to him. He describes this divine appearance with specific details, noting that Christ was 6'1" with long face, tan skin, greenish eyes, and with a beard. He goes on to affirm the foundational Christian belief in Christ's death, resurrection, and ultimate return to judge the living and the dead, urging listeners to accept Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior, for without him, eternal doom awaits. Bishop Marmari Emmanuel additionally takes a moment to critique notable figures like Anthony Fauci and Klaus Schwab, effectively lowering their worldly importance when compared to the majesty of Christ. Essentially, the bishop asserts that no earthly power can diminish the meeting of Jesus in heaven. When I meet Jesus, I see everyone a piece of dust. He finalizes his spirited monologue with an open invitation to these characters and listeners to focus on Christ, pointing out that real power lies in emulating the true Christ. The bishop emphasizes the impact when one lets Christ speak through them, noting that the Holy Spirit can touch any heart, mind, or soul, as God is the supreme authority. The bishop's fiery and passionate rhetoric reinforces Christ's divine authority, underlining the transformative and empowering impact of fully surrendering to Christ. The bishop's message stands as a clarion call for the return to Christ-centered faith, setting aside the distractions of the secular world and focusing on building a relationship with Jesus Christ.